They tore down my bridge at sunrise. I heard the diesel roar before I saw it. That gut-deep mechanical rumble echoing off the valley walls like thunder trapped underground. It was the kind of sound that yanks you out of half-sleep and straight into disbelief. When I stepped out onto my porch, coffee still steaming in my hand, there it was. A yellow cat bulldozer, squatting in the middle of my field like an uninvited monster. Its blade glinted under the morning light, slick with dew and malice. Then it moved, slow, deliberate, pushing through 80 years of my family's history. Stone cracked like gunfire, timbers splintered like ribs, the air filled with dust and the stinging smell of diesel and wet earth, and betrayal. My heart didn't just drop, it burned. Because that bridge wasn't just a pile of lumber and bolts. My grandfather built it with his own hands back in 1941. Every plank carried a story, every nail a memory. And now it was collapsing under the weight of someone else's arrogance. And there she was, standing behind the machine, wearing designer sunglasses, pearl earrings, and a silk scarf that fluttered like a victory flag. Marcia Cole, president of the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't confused. She was smiling, filming, like it was a trophy hunt. "Mr. Kettering, this is for public safety," she called out over the engine, phone still up. "You'll thank us later." I could barely hear her through the roar, but I could read those words on her lips, calm, self-satisfied, like a teacher correcting a stubborn child. Public safety? My grandfather's bridge wasn't her property to touch. It wasn't hers to judge, to inspect, to destroy. A lifetime of respect, erased in 5 minutes of her self-righteousness. The smell of diesel mixed with the metallic tang of the creek water. My boots sank into mud as I walked closer. Dust coated my tongue. I could feel the vibration through the ground, each impact of that blade hitting what my family had built. "Turn it off," I shouted. "You're trespassing." She lowered her phone just long enough to smirk. "We have authorization, Mr. Kettering. Environmental Compliance Notice. Section 12. Show me the notice." She didn't. She just waved her hand and shouted to the operator, "Keep going." That blade groaned against the final timber, and with a sound like thunder snapping in half, the bridge gave way. The creek swallowed it whole. I just stood there, fists tight around a coffee mug that suddenly felt like it weighed 10 pounds. She thought she'd won something that morning. She thought I'd roll over, sign a form, pay a fine, and disappear. But what she didn't know, what not a single person in that shiny new neighborhood knew, was that by the end of the week, I'd legally own the only road leading to their $1 million subdivision. And when the sheriff closed it, when those bright SUVs lined up behind locked gates with nowhere to go, they'd be begging me to reopen it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me rewind and tell you how this started. What would you do if someone bulldozed a piece of your family's history? Drop your answer in the comments. My name's Ethan Kettering. 58 years old. Retired civil engineer. Widower. Born and raised right here in Hawthorne County, Pennsylvania. Population just shy of 9,000 and falling a little more every year. This land has been in my family since before World War II. And that bridge, the one they tore down, was built by my grandfather, Walter Kettering, in the summer of 1941. He wasn't a man who talked much, but he believed in doing things right the first time. Every beam on that bridge was forged by hand, iron brackets hammered in his own workshop. No permits, no contractors, just calloused hands, grit, and pride. He used to say, "Build something honest, Ethan, and it'll outlive you." Turns out he was right until this HOA came along. That bridge connected my 90-acre property to County Route 16, a narrow 2-lane that winds through farmland and feeds down to the new development they call Meadowbrook Estates. To most people, it was just a shortcut over a muddy creek. To me, it was a piece of my family's heartbeat. My dad rebuilt it once in the 70s after a spring flood, added new oak planks and railings. I helped him. I was 15, holding the flashlight while he bolted down crossbeams. I can still hear the creak of that wood in the humid night air, smell the varnish, feel the sawdust on my arms. In 2003, another flood came through. I was the one who reinforced it then, concrete footing, new bearings, modern load rating. I might have been an engineer by trade, but that job wasn't just math and blueprints. It was personal. Every plank on that bridge told a story. My father's initials are still carved into the guardrail. JK. Faded but visible. The old brass bolt near the midpoint? That came from the first factory my grandfather ever worked at. When my wife, Helen, passed away 5 years ago, breast cancer, that bridge became something else entirely. It wasn't just a structure anymore. It was the place I could breathe. I used to walk out there every evening after dinner, sit on the edge with a cup of coffee, and watch sunlight scatter across the creek. The smell of honeysuckle drifting through the trees, frogs starting their nightly chorus. That was peace. Not luxury, not wealth, just peace. After a lifetime designing other people's infrastructure, city bridges, drainage systems, things that outlive you but never belong to you, that one bridge was mine. My father's sweat, my hands, my memories. That was the last thing tying me to this land. Then, about 2 years ago, the county sold off the farmland just beyond my property line to a developer out of Harrisburg. They bulldozed orchards, dug trenches, and paved what used to be pastureland into 83 identical luxury homes, each with a matching mailbox and a homeowners association that promised exclusive living with community standards. I figured, fine, people need homes. I'd wave when I passed their trucks on Route 16. At first, it seemed harmless. The sound of nail guns, distant laughter from open house tours, the smell of fresh asphalt. For a while, I even liked it. It reminded me the world was still moving. And then came the glossy flyers in the mail. Join the Meadowbrook HOA family. As if family was something you could vote into existence with a monthly fee. I didn't join, of course. I wasn't part of their development. My property predated their deeds by 75 years. I paid my county taxes, kept my land neat, and minded my own business. So when their welcome committee dropped off a community compliance packet, I laughed, thanked them politely, and went back to my garden. I didn't know that packet was the first warning shot. That behind those smiles and manicured lawns was a board president named Marcia Cole, a woman who treated bylaws like holy scripture and power like oxygen. At the time, I thought she was just another well-dressed busybody who needed a hobby. But I was wrong. But peace doesn't last long when greed smells opportunity. Enter Marcia Cole, 61 years old, former real estate broker turned self-anointed queen of Meadowbrook. Think Stepford meets Stalin, if Stalin carried a clipboard and drove a leased BMW. The first time I met her was a Thursday morning last spring. I was tightening the bolts on my tractor's mower deck when a white BMW SUV glided up my gravel driveway like it was allergic to dirt. The engine purred, but the perfume cloud hit before the car even stopped. Something expensive and artificial, the kind that lingers after people leave the room. She rolled down the window halfway. Perfect manicure, pearl earrings, hair so sprayed it could have survived a hurricane. "Mr. Kettering," she said, smiling like she'd just discovered a new species. "Your bridge looks quaint." Her tone stretched that last word like it was a compliment trying to escape a chokehold. "But it's a liability to the community," she continued. "We'd like to help you replace it, at your expense, of course. We already have a contractor who can." I wiped the grease from my hands and leaned against the tractor. "Ma'am, that bridge has been here longer than your HOA's been a thought in anybody's head." The smile froze on her face, lips tight, nostrils flaring almost imperceptibly. Then she gave me the kind of look I've only ever seen from people who think they're untouchable. "We'll see about that," she said, and drove off, tires crunching like brittle bones on gravel. I figured that was the end of it. A harmless encounter with a nosy neighbor. I was wrong. The following week, I found a crisp white envelope taped to my mailbox. Letterhead at the top, Meadowbrook Homeowners Association. Inside, a notice of violation. Unauthorized structure spanning HOA property. Immediate compliance required. I actually laughed out loud standing in my driveway. HOA property? The nerve. My land's deed went back 3 generations before their subdivision even existed. The notice went on to claim the bridge posed an environmental risk and lacked community design approval. I read it twice, then looked out across my field toward Meadowbrook, those identical beige houses gleaming in the morning light like clone dollhouses. That was the first shot fired. I sent back a polite, factual email, attached a scanned copy of my deed, highlighted boundary lines, even threw in the county parcel ID for good measure. I figured logic would end it. 2 days later, another envelope, this one thicker, a courtesy warning, and stapled to it, a printed photograph of my bridge taken from across the creek. Someone had crossed onto my property to snap it. The note at the bottom read, "Failure to comply may result in daily fines of $250 and further enforcement actions." That was when the air around Meadowbrook started to change. Marcia wasn't just enforcing rules. She was testing dominance. I started noticing her SUV parked near my property line more often. Window cracked, camera pointed toward my bridge. Once, I caught her standing at the culvert, clipboard in hand, measuring something that didn't need measuring. When I walked up to her, she didn't even flinch. "Just routine community evaluation," she said, not bothering to look at me. "Community?" I asked. "This isn't your community. This is private land." "It's all connected, Mr. Kettering," she replied smoothly. "Safety doesn't stop at the fence line." She said it like a sermon. Later that evening, I saw her on the HOA's Facebook page posting about unpermitted structures impacting neighborhood safety. No names mentioned, but everyone in Meadowbrook knew exactly who she meant. Marcia Cole didn't just play dirty. She played bureaucratic warfare. Her weapons weren't guns or fists. They were forms, bylaws, and signatures forged from entitlement. By the end of that week, I'd received 3 notices, 2 compliance recommendations, and 1 friendly reminder that the HOA reserves the right to seek county assistance if the matter remains unresolved. I'd spent a career designing bridges strong enough to withstand hurricanes. But I was starting to realize this wasn't going to be a storm I could outbuild. This was going to be a siege. Started small. It always does. Anonymous complaints showed up in my mailbox. Unsightly shed visible from public view. Then came a warning about noise violations after 6 p.m. for my tractor idling behind the barn. Funny thing, I hadn't even started the engine that night. First, I shrugged it off. Bureaucratic nonsense. But then the fines started. One for $150, unapproved bridge maintenance. Another for $200, weed overgrowth near common area. Common area, my ass. That common area was my backyard. Land my family's owned since 1938. They weren't enforcing rules. They were testing obedience. A few days later, 2 men in reflective vests showed up without warning. Clipboards, measuring tapes, the whole show. One of them stepped right over my private property sign. "Morning, gentlemen," I called out. "You boys from the county?" He didn't look up. "We're inspectors, sir. HOA requested a safety assessment." "Got a warrant or authorization letter?" He blinked. "We don't need one. This is community property." I smiled. "Then you're lost, because this isn't your community." They backed off eventually, muttering something about non-compliance documentation. That's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a campaign. Marcia had decided to make my life hell, one envelope at a time. So I fought back the smart way, quietly. I installed a full 4K camera system around my property, motion alerts, infrared, timestamp synced to cloud storage. All legal, all visible. If they wanted a war, I was going to film every shot. For about a week, it went quiet. Too quiet. Then came the vandalism. One morning, I walked out to the creek and saw a metal survey stake hammered into the dirt by my bridge's foundation. Bright orange paint across it. Demolition county approved. Except no such permit existed. I checked. Twice. The marking paint was fresh, you could still smell the solvent. That night, I sat up late on the porch just watching. Past midnight, the wind carried a faint chemical tang gasoline. The kind that doesn't belong near wood or water. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the creek. The beam caught ripples on the current, shimmering under the moonlight, and the unmistakable sheen of fuel floating on the surface. Someone had poured gas under the bridge. That bridge was seasoned oak, dry as bone. One spark and it would have gone up like a torch. My chest went cold. I checked the nearest camera feed on my phone. Motion alert, 12:47 a.m. headlights. A dark SUV, engine idling near the creek for 3 full minutes before driving off. I froze the frame, zoomed in. License plate, partial but readable. I ran it through an old friend in county records. The vehicle came back registered to Howard Cole, Marcia's husband. The next morning, I stood at the edge of that bridge, hands gripping the rail so tight my knuckles went white. The smell of burned fuel still hung in the air, mixed with the clean scent of creek water and pine. There's a special kind of anger that doesn't make you shout. It just settles in. Cold, heavy, and sharp. I spent decades as a civil engineer, navigating red tape thicker than concrete. I know when a problem's structural and when it's personal. This was both. Over the next week, the harassment escalated. A letter from the county arrived, anonymous citizen complaint about my property drainage. Then another about illegal water diversion. Both traced back to Meadowbrook's HOA office IP address when I checked the submission logs. They'd weaponized the system, using bureaucracy as a form of siege warfare. Then the noises started. Car horns at midnight, engines revving on my road, right outside the gate. One night, someone left a bag of trash dumped at my driveway, torn open, contents spilling across the gravel. Old paint cans, fast food wrappers, empty beer bottles. They wanted me to break. They wanted me angry enough to lash out, so they could call the sheriff, point fingers, and make me the villain. But I'd spent a career solving problems without losing my temper. You don't pour foundations by shouting at concrete. You do it with patience, precision, and pressure. So I let them keep coming. Every letter, every fine, every fake complaint. I documented it all. By the end of that month, I had a digital archive the size of a court case. And that's exactly what it was going to become. Because the line between harassment and criminal act, they just crossed it. When people push you long enough, you stop reacting and start researching. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was methodical. So I started digging. First stop, the Hawthorne County Clerk's office. Rows of dusty cabinets, flickering fluorescent lights, and that faint smell of old paper and toner that always follows bureaucracy. I asked the clerk, Martha Jensen, for parcel maps, easement filings, zoning changes, anything tied to Meadowbrook Estates. She looked at me over her glasses and said, "You know, Mr. Kettering, you're not the first person to come asking about them." That got my attention. I spent 2 full days going through records, making copies of everything with my name anywhere near it. Old plats, survey boundaries, drainage plans. I traced every line until my eyes blurred. And then I saw it. A new proposed zoning overlay, stamped just a month earlier, showing a recreation trail expansion that cut straight across my creek, the same creek that ran under my bridge. According to the filing, the trail would provide safe public access between Meadowbrook Estates and County Route 16. The problem? That land wasn't theirs. It was mine. The HOA was trying to quietly annex part of my property into their community easement, reclassifying it as public utility space. And that bridge, my grandfather's bridge, was the last obstacle in their path. It all clicked. They hadn't destroyed it out of spite. They'd done it to clear the way for their project. But here's where things really started to stink. Attached to the zoning packet was an environmental study, one that declared my bridge structurally unsafe and a hazard to local water flow. That same study was the justification for the emergency demolition. I looked up the firm listed on the header, Cole Environmental Safety Solutions, LLC. It took me about 5 seconds to find the registration on the state website. Owner, Caroline Vance. Registered business address, Marcia Cole's home mailbox. Her cousin. That wasn't an inspection. That was fraud, straight up, bold-faced fraud dressed up as paperwork. I sat there in the clerk's office, staring at the printout, feeling my pulse steady instead of spike. Because when you've got proof, you don't shout, you plan. That evening, I went home, poured a stiff drink, and started organizing everything on my kitchen table. Deeds, surveys, photographs, timestamps from my cameras. The evidence was piling up like puzzle pieces finally finding their place. But something was still missing: the demolition order itself. So I filed a right-to-know law request under Pennsylvania Statute 65 PS Section 67.703, the same law I'd used years ago when working with state engineers. 2 weeks later, I got a brown envelope in the mail marked Public Records Disclosure. Inside, a digital printout of Meadowbrook HOA's permit submission, and there it was, a signature field labeled Property Owner Authorization. Under it, my full name, Ethan R. Kettering, digitally signed. Only problem? I'd never signed a damn thing. The timestamp was from a Tuesday afternoon, the same day I'd been 3 counties over visiting my sister in Scranton. They hadn't just trespassed. They'd forged my identity on a county document. I remember staring at that line, my fake signature, with a strange calm that felt colder than rage. Because harassment you can shrug off. Vandalism you can repair. But forgery? That's a felony. That's how you take down an empire like Marcia's, not with fists, but with facts. The next morning, I called my attorney, Lena Porter, and emailed her everything. Within an hour, she called back. "Ethan," she said, "this isn't just harassment anymore. This is a coordinated fraud case. You've got enough here to involve the state attorney's office." I looked out over the wreckage of my bridge, the creek running silent beneath broken beams, and realized something. For months, they treated me like the problem. But now I had the truth. And truth has a funny way of changing the terrain. They dug their own foundation for this mess, and I was about to collapse it from underneath them. The neighborhood split like a bad marriage. Half the homeowners believed Marcia's story, that I was some bitter old man standing in the way of progress, hoarding community resources and refusing to cooperate. The other half, mostly younger families and newcomers, started to ask questions, quietly, carefully, as if doing so might get them fined too. That's when the smear campaign began. It started online, the place where cowardice dresses itself up as courage. Posts on the Meadowbrook Community Facebook group, Bridge Man blocks HOA improvements. He threatened volunteers. Rumor, unstable since wife died. Each post a little bolder than the last, each comment piling on. Someone even uploaded a doctored photo of my property. The broken bridge, a sepia filter, and the word condemned, stamped across it in red block letters. The caption read, "Safety hazard, owner refuses to comply." It got 36 likes in an hour. At first, I ignored it. I'd seen how gossip burned itself out once the novelty faded. But this wasn't just talk, this was targeted narrative control. Neighbors I used to wave to at the post office stopped making eye contact. Kids on bikes rode past my fence and whispered. Even the mail carrier started leaving envelopes at the end of the drive, as if my property might bite. By week 6, I wasn't invited to the HOA's community barbecue, which, to be clear, was held on the other side of my fence, on a strip of land they still believed was shared space. They even built a temporary gravel bypass along my property's edge, a crude little road looping around the creek so residents wouldn't have to drive near my hazard zone. Illegal, of course, but it gave them a sense of power, a symbolic victory. Marcia was clever like that. She didn't need to prove she was right. She just needed enough people to believe I was wrong. One afternoon, I was loading lumber into my truck when a woman from the subdivision, I think her name was Susan Marks, new homeowner, young kids, stopped by the fence line. She looked nervous, like she was talking to someone radioactive. "Mr. Kettering," she said, "I just wanted to ask, is it true you're suing the HOA?" I wiped my hands on my jeans and leaned on the tailgate. "Not yet," I said, "but I'm close." Her eyes widened. "Marcia said you're trying to take over community land." I smiled, small and tired. "Ma'am, that community land has my father's name on the deed." She hesitated, then quieter. "You know, she's been telling people you threatened her husband." That one made me laugh. "The same husband who drove a gas can down to my creek at midnight?" She didn't know what to say after that. She just nodded, whispered, "I believe you," and left. It became clear this wasn't just a land dispute anymore. It was social isolation as a weapon. They stopped plowing the shared entry road that technically ran over my land. They accidentally blocked my mailbox twice with landscaping trucks. A petition circulated to restrict access to my property through their community lanes. Even the local news got a whiff of it. A short article ran in the Hawthorne Gazette. Property owner defies HOA safety mandate. Residents concerned over bridge collapse. No one called me for comment. The public had their villain. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It's a gift wrapped in insult. While Marcia was busy building her public stage, I was working behind the curtain, filing reports, gathering evidence, and connecting dots she didn't even know were on the map. I'd already proven they'd forged my signature. I'd already found the fake environmental report. Now all I needed was to see how deep the rot went. So I let her keep performing. Every Facebook post, every backyard whisper, every smug HOA meeting where she promised, "We're handling the situation." I stayed silent, because silence has a way of amplifying the sound of their own mistakes. And the louder they got, the easier they were to trace. I'd sit on my porch in the evenings, sipping coffee, watching the lights flicker across Meadowbrook like stars on the wrong side of the sky. You could almost feel the tension humming in the air. Neighbors peeking from windows, wondering which side would win. They thought they were isolating me, but what they were really doing was uniting my evidence. By trying to turn the town against me, Marcia had made herself the most visible person in Hawthorne County, and that was about to be her biggest mistake yet. Because while she was busy gathering followers, I was gathering proof. And soon, one of her own would hand me the key that brought her whole empire down. Then the official letters started coming, one after another, like artillery fire wrapped in envelopes. The first was a cease and desist notice accusing me of obstructing community operations. The next claimed I owed $12,000 in community fines for ongoing noncompliance. Noncompliance with what exactly? Existing laws didn't apply to my property, only to theirs. Then came the real punchline. A formal notice alleging that my land was impeding emergency access. According to them, my private gate and bridge were somehow blocking ambulances from reaching their homes, even though there was an entirely separate county road leading into Meadowbrook. It was nonsense, but it was dangerous nonsense, written in the language of bureaucracy, the kind that can choke you without ever raising its voice. That's when I called attorney Lena Porter, a land use specialist out of Harrisburg. She'd been my late wife's college friend, and one of the few people I trusted to see through legal fog. When I dropped the stack of letters on her desk, she spent a solid 10 minutes flipping through each page, her brow furrowing deeper with every clause. Finally, she leaned back, removed her glasses, and said, "Ethan, they don't have a leg to stand on. But they do have connections, the county commissioner's her brother-in-law. That means they'll drag this out just to make you bleed money." I told her I wasn't going to bleed. I was going to fight. We filed counterclaims within the week. Property damage, harassment, defamation, and forgery. All backed by time-stamped photos, surveillance footage, and copies of falsified permits. Lena was meticulous. She built the case like an architect building a fortress. One document at a time, every line airtight. But Marcia didn't back down. If anything, she doubled down. Within days, Meadowbrook's Legal Affairs Committee, a title that sounded more official than it was, issued a nuisance injunction claiming that my deteriorating infrastructure created community safety risks. It was absurd. My property wasn't even under their jurisdiction, but the intent was clear. Drown me in paperwork and hope I'd give up. Then one morning, my security cameras caught something new, something bold. A construction truck parked near my southern fence line, its tailgate open, workers in neon vests unloading heavy cement blocks. The side of each block was stenciled in black paint, "Future Meadowbrook Walking Path." They were building, on my land. At first, I thought maybe I was seeing things. But when I checked the GPS coordinates from the footage, there was no doubt. They were 15 feet past the property boundary, right on my soil. I called Lena immediately. "They're building on my property," I said, pacing on my porch, heart pounding like a drumline. "Document everything," she told me calmly. "Photos, video, timestamps. Don't confront them directly, not yet. We'll file for an injunction by morning. But they're already pouring concrete, I said. That's fine, she replied. The more they build, the deeper their hole gets. This is about to go federal. The phrase hit me like a gunshot, go federal. That meant crossing the line from a local zoning fight into real legal territory. Fraud, forged permits, and federal property interference. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those cement blocks stacking up like tombstones for common sense. Outside, the hum of machinery echoed through the valley. My cameras picked up movement until nearly 2 a.m. Headlights bobbing, silhouettes of workers trying to finish under the cover of darkness. They thought they were unstoppable. The next morning, Lena and I filed the injunction with the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Pennsylvania. Her brief was surgical, detailed maps, parcel histories, digital proof of forgery, and a video still showing Marcia's husband giving directions to the crew. By noon, the court clerk confirmed receipt. By evening, the Meadowbrook construction site went quiet. But not for long. 2 days later, I found another envelope on my gate, sealed with the HOA's logo, their own counterletter claiming I was interfering with approved community projects. It was signed by Vice Chair of Legal Affairs, a man named David Cole, her son. They'd turned this into a family enterprise. That's when the game changed for me. This wasn't about a bridge anymore. This was about power, and they'd been using it unchecked for years. But now they'd left a trail. Forged documents, fraudulent contractors, misused HOA funds. All of it recorded, all of it traceable. And while they thought they were burying me under paperwork, I was quietly laying the foundation of their own undoing. Because in civil engineering, you learn a rule that applies just as well to people as it does to structures. When something is built on a bad foundation, you don't have to destroy it, you just have to let gravity finish the job. And gravity was coming for them. I'd spent months feeling like I was fighting an entire system alone. The HOA, the county, the endless paper trails. But sometimes, when you stand up long enough, the right people notice. The first was Joe Ramirez, a retired land surveyor who'd worked on the original subdivision plans for Meadowbrook back in the early 2000s. He called me after hearing about the lawsuit through the local grapevine. "Meet me at Harper's Diner," he said. "Bring a notepad." Joe was one of those old-school guys who carried a pocket ruler and wore flannel no matter the season. Over black coffee and pancakes, he pulled out a tube of faded blueprints. Yellowed edges, coffee stains, and a smell of nostalgia mixed with truth. He rolled them open across the table and tapped his pen on a thin, gray line that ran along the southern boundary of my property. "See this?" he asked. I leaned in. "Looks like a service road. Access road easement," he corrected. "The one the HOA uses every day. Cuts right through your parcel." I frowned. "You mean the main road that leads into Meadowbrook?" He nodded. "Every SUV, every delivery truck, every school bus that drives into their gated community. They're rolling across your dirt." I just sat there for a second, processing that. All the noise, all the smug HOA meetings, all the threats. Every single one of them depended on a strip of ground that legally belonged to me. Joe smiled, slow and knowing. "They never updated the plat after the sale. The easement only grants them access. It doesn't transfer ownership. You still hold the title under that asphalt." That was the moment the board flipped. Because in one motion, Marcia had gone from queen of the neighborhood to a trespasser sitting on my land. Before we left, Joe leaned in close and said, "She's been doing this for years. Moving fences, shifting boundaries, scaring old landowners out of filing disputes. But now you've got her cornered. She just doesn't know it yet." The next person to step up was Martha Jensen, the same county records clerk who'd helped me earlier. She was the kind of woman who remembered everything. Dates, signatures, even the smell of cheap perfume from people who came through her office too often. One evening, she called me at home. "Ethan, I probably shouldn't tell you this," she whispered, "but Marcia's name keeps showing up on contractor filings for maintenance projects that don't exist." "Fake invoices?" I asked. "Worse," she said. "Same contractor names, same addresses, but different business IDs every year. It's a shell game." Martha sent copies of the filings to Lena, who traced the companies back to one account. A local LLC registered under Howard Cole, Marcia's husband. The same man my cameras had caught by the creek at midnight. It was all there: financial fraud, property manipulation, forged signatures. Every thread led back to the same web. Lena's eyes gleamed when she saw the paperwork. "They've been laundering HOA dues through fake contracts," she said. "This isn't just a land dispute anymore, Ethan. This is white-collar crime." We started assembling everything like building blocks. Timestamp videos, property plats, GPS coordinates, contractor filings, and every official document the HOA had ever mailed me. Lena even hired a forensic accountant to verify the cash flow between HOA accounts and the shell companies. The numbers didn't lie. Over $200,000 in community maintenance payments had vanished in 3 years. Most of it funneled through fake firms tied to the Cole family. The irony was poetic. They accused me of non-compliance, while they were stealing from their own neighbors. We backed everything up on encrypted drives and cloud servers. Every file had digital fingerprints, every map cross-referenced with county records. Lena kept saying, "Don't just gather proof, make it irrefutable." So that's what I did. I even printed out hard copies and stored them in a fireproof safe behind my workshop, just in case someone decided to pay me another midnight visit. By the end of that week, my kitchen table looked like a war room. Stacks of manila folders, printed emails, maps layered over satellite images. But for the first time in months, I felt something close to control. The pieces were aligning. The bridge, the land, the fraud, the forgeries, it all connected now. Marcia had played her game in public. I was playing mine in silence. And this time I had an army, small, quiet, but sharp. A retired surveyor with the truth in his maps. A clerk with a conscience. A lawyer who knew how to weaponize evidence. The case was building brick by brick, paper by paper. And soon, the weight of that evidence was going to crush the entire Meadowbrook empire. We turned the evidence over to the state attorney's office on a Wednesday morning. 3 binders thick, labeled and indexed like a professional audit. Lena personally delivered them to the prosecutor's assistant and handed over a flash drive containing the digital archive. Every forgery, every transaction, every photograph. Within 2 weeks, the call came. The FBI's Public Corruption Unit had opened a joint investigation with the state's Financial Crimes Division. That's when I knew things were about to get serious. When the federal government steps in, it's no longer about fines and local politics. It's about crimes that carry prison time. Turns out, Marcia and her inner circle weren't just petty tyrants running an HOA. They were embezzling money, a lot of it. Investigators uncovered over $217,000 siphoned from HOA funds across 3 years. The paper trail read like a masterclass in small-town corruption. Fake maintenance contracts, bogus environmental assessments, inflated landscaping invoices, and even community safety studies billed to taxpayers through county reimbursements. My bridge, the one they destroyed, was just collateral damage in a much bigger scheme. They needed a scapegoat, a distraction, something loud and dramatic to hide the money trail while they quietly moved funds between accounts. When the FBI subpoenaed Meadowbrook's bank statements, everything unraveled fast. The money flowed straight into an LLC called Cole Property Solutions, registered under Marcia's husband, Howard. From there, it was spent on personal luxuries. A private lake house in upstate New York, new vehicles, and even tuition payments for their son, David. They weren't protecting the neighborhood. They were robbing it blind. One of the investigators, Special Agent Rebecca Lawton, met with me at my house a few days after the probe began. She wore a navy windbreaker with the FBI crest and spoke in the calm, clipped tone of someone who's seen this story too many times before. "Mr. Kettering," she said, flipping through the files on my porch table. "These people used your bridge as a cover. They needed a reason to move money out of the HOA's infrastructure budget, so they created a demolition emergency. Once the funds were approved, they rerouted the payment through their shell company." I leaned back in my chair. "So destroying my bridge wasn't about safety?" "No," she said flatly. "It was about laundering." She paused, scanning a document I'd printed. the falsified environmental report with Marcia's cousin's name on it. "This right here," she added, tapping the page, "is federal wire fraud. It's enough to open the door to a full-scale raid." And that's exactly what happened next. The Hawthorne County Sheriff's Office, working with FBI agents, executed a search warrant on the Meadowbrook HOA office, a converted model home that looked more like a boutique than a workspace. When they went in, they found everything: hard drives, bank ledgers, and dozens of forged documents. The investigators laid them out like a gallery of lies. There were copies of every letter Marcia had mailed me, the same ones stamped with her phony title, Environmental Safety Chair. She'd made it up. The position didn't even exist in the HOA's charter. They also found digital templates of the fake county safety notices, all saved on her desktop. She'd even kept drafts. The arrogance of someone who thought no one would ever dare to check. By noon, half the board was under questioning. By sunset, subpoenas were flying faster than HOA fines ever had. The dominoes started to fall hard. The first confession came from the HOA treasurer, a nervous man named Mark Ellis, who cracked under pressure during his second interview. He admitted that Marcia had personally directed all financial transfers and told the board to sign blank checks for efficiency. Then came the second, David Cole, her son and vice chair of legal affairs. Investigators discovered he'd used HOA funds to pay off credit card debt and lease luxury cars under the guise of community vehicle maintenance. Each testimony painted a clearer picture. The Meadowbrook HOA wasn't a neighborhood committee. It was a family-run criminal operation wrapped in a suburban bow. When the FBI finished auditing their books, the total fraud exceeded $217,000, not including fines, unpaid taxes, and restitution claims. Lena was right. This wasn't about a bridge or a boundary. It was about greed, entitlement, and the belief that power could rewrite property lines. By the time the warrants were fully executed, the Cole family's assets were frozen. Their lake house was seized. The HOA's bank accounts were locked. And the local news, the same paper that once called me Bridgeman, ran a front-page story that read, "FBI raids Meadowbrook HOA, president and family under investigation for federal fraud." I clipped that headline and pinned it to my workshop wall. For months, they tried to paint me as the villain, the recluse, the troublemaker, the obstructionist. Now their faces were the ones flashing on the evening news. The sheriff himself called me that night. "Mr. Kettering," he said, "I think it's safe to say you were right all along." I smiled into the phone. "No, Sheriff," I told him. "I was just patient. Because when people build empires on stolen ground, they always forget one thing: the truth doesn't need permission to surface." And now it finally had. Lena wanted me to stay calm. She always did. "Let the law finish this, Ethan," she said over the phone, her tone steady and patient. But patience only goes so far when you're sitting on a card that can end the game. And I had one left to play. We'd known for weeks that the HOA's main access road, the one every SUV and delivery truck used, technically ran across my property line. Joe Ramirez's maps proved it beyond argument. The county records confirmed it in writing. I wasn't just the owner of my bridge anymore. I was the owner of the only road leading into their neighborhood. So we filed an emergency injunction for temporary closure of Meadowbrook Access Road for infrastructure review and safety evaluation. The justification was airtight. I cited the bridge demolition, the property damage, and the ongoing legal investigation. Since the deed confirmed that strip of asphalt was legally mine, the county had no choice but to approve it. 2 days later, at sunrise, I stood on my porch sipping coffee while a county crew rolled in. Orange vests, flashing lights, official trucks. They didn't even look at me twice. They just went to work setting up bright orange barricades across the only road leading into Meadowbrook Estates. Within an hour, the entire neighborhood was sealed off. From my porch, I watched the first wave of panic unfold like a silent film. SUVs lined up at the barricade. A few residents got out, pacing, gesturing wildly. One woman tried to move the barriers herself until a county officer told her to step back. Another shouted that she had a dentist appointment in town. Someone else demanded to see the person responsible. That person was me. By noon, I'd gotten 4 phone calls, 3 emails, and 2 hand-delivered letters from HOA board members begging me to reopen the road for community safety. Every message ended the same way. We'll speak to Marcia and resolve this. I smiled, sipping my coffee. Talk to your president, I said. It was poetic, really. They destroyed my bridge to make way for their trail project. And now they couldn't even drive out of their subdivision without my permission. The same arrogance that made them ignore boundaries had boxed them in completely. Meanwhile, Lena called with an update. The FBI's ready, she said. They're planning a controlled confrontation at the HOA office tomorrow morning. They've got the warrant, and the building's already wired for audio. My role was simple. Deliver one last certified letter to the HOA headquarters, officially notifying them of the road closure and my legal claim over the property. The letter wasn't just paperwork. It was bait. The FBI wanted Marcia to respond, to make her usual threats, to incriminate herself on tape. Ethan, Lena said before hanging up, when you walk in there tomorrow, keep it simple. Don't rise to her anger. Just hand her the letter and leave. Let the agents do their work. Understood, I said, but inside, my nerves hummed like a live wire. That night, the valley felt unnaturally quiet. No engines, no construction sounds, just the faint rustle of trees and the trickle of the creek. For the first time in months, Meadowbrook's lights across the field looked dim, like the whole place was holding its breath. I sat on my porch with the letter on the table beside me, staring at the faint ink of my signature under the county seal. It was official. It was legal. And it was the last piece in a puzzle I'd been solving for almost a year. In the distance, I could see the orange barricades glowing under the streetlights. Beyond them, faint voices. Angry, frustrated, trapped. The sound carried on the wind. For once, I didn't feel rage, just resolve. Tomorrow, this would end. The plan was set. The authorities were ready. The evidence was in place. And the woman who had tried to take everything from me was about to walk straight into the trap she'd built for herself. Friday morning, 9:02 a.m. The air was crisp, heavy with that early autumn chill that smells like iron and burnt leaves. I parked just off the main road and walked toward the HOA office with the certified letter in my hand. The sky was overcast, pale and unforgiving, like the world itself was holding its breath. Marcia was already there. Her white BMW angled across 2 parking spaces like a declaration of entitlement. She stood beside it, phone glued to her ear, pacing back and forth. Her hair was perfect, as always, but her eyes were rimmed red. She was unraveling, but still trying to wear control like a coat 2 sizes too small. When she saw me, she snapped her phone shut. "You think you can hold this whole neighborhood hostage?" she hissed. Her voice cracked, part fury, part desperation. I didn't raise mine. "You brought this on yourself, Marcia. You forged documents, stole funds, and destroyed property." She laughed, but it came out brittle. "You can't prove any of that." I took one more step forward, calm and deliberate. "I don't have to. The people who can are already on their way." Before she could reply, the low rumble of engines filled the air. 2 black SUVs rolled up behind her, tires crunching on gravel. Doors opened in perfect sync, that quiet, professional kind of movement that tells you it's about to be over. 4 FBI agents stepped out, jackets crisp, badges flashing in the dull light. One of them, Agent Lawton, the same woman who'd come to my house weeks earlier, stepped forward and produced a folder. "Marcia Cole," she said firmly, "you are under arrest for wire fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to defraud the county of Hawthorne. You have the right to remain silent." Marcia froze. The color drained from her face. She looked at me, then back at the agents. "You can't do this. You can't just—" Agent Lawton held up a hand. "Ma'am, we can. And we are." Behind her, more vehicles pulled in, local sheriff's cruisers, unmarked sedans, even a news van already setting up by the barricades down the road. Word had spread fast. Neighbors gathered at the edge of the orange barricades, whispering, recording on their phones. The same people who had once believed every lie she told were now watching her empire collapse in real time. Marcia's husband, Howard, stumbled out of the office doorway, his tie crooked, eyes wide. "What's happening?" he barked. Agent Lawton turned toward him. "You might want to call your attorney, Mr. Cole." He froze, seeing his wife's wrists pulled behind her as an agent snapped on the cuffs. The metallic click echoed louder than it should have. Marcia tried to twist away, shouting, "You have no idea who I am. I built this community." Agent Lawton didn't even blink. "No, ma'am. You exploited it." When they turned her around, her sunglasses slipped off her face and fell into the dirt. The same dirt she'd once called unsightly during one of her HOA meetings. They landed face down, one lens cracked. The agents led her toward the SUV. The neighborhood was silent except for the faint mechanical hum of her idling BMW, the last hollow sound of her control dying in the background. That hum faded when an officer reached in and turned the key. Just like that, the engine and her career went still. As they read her rights, I stood there holding the certified letter. I never even had to hand it over. The document was just a prop now, the formality before the fall. Agent Lawton approached me once the cuffs were secure. "Mr. Kettering," she said, "thank you for your cooperation. We'll handle it from here." I nodded, slipping the envelope back into my coat pocket. "She won't be coming back, will she?" Lawton shook her head. "Not for a long time." Behind us, reporters started calling out questions, their voices rising like a swarm. "Is it true the HOA funds were stolen? Was this tied to county fraud? How long had this been going on?" I didn't answer. I just stepped aside and let the cameras roll. As the SUVs pulled away, I caught sight of Marcia through the tinted glass. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked small. No arrogance, no composure, just fear. The convoy turned onto the main road and disappeared past the barricades. For a moment, the neighborhood stood completely still. Then, like a valve releasing, people started talking, quiet murmurs, nervous laughter, a few sighs of relief. Even the children playing near the fence stopped and watched, wide-eyed, sensing that something had shifted for good. I looked down at the dirt where her sunglasses still lay. The lens reflected the cloudy sky and the faint outline of the bridge they'd destroyed. A bridge that would soon rise again. Felt poetic. I exhaled and looked back toward my property, the creek glinting in the distance under weak sunlight. The wind carried the faint smell of earth and rain. Clean, untainted, free. The war was over. Marcia Cole was gone. And justice, long delayed, had finally shown up wearing a badge and a calm expression. 3 months later, the federal court handed down its sentence. The courtroom was quiet. Polished oak benches, the low hum of cameras outside, and the echo of the judge's voice cutting through the still air. 12 years in federal prison for wire fraud and forgery. $312,000 in restitution to the HOA members who had unknowingly funded Marcia's empire. And $128,000 in civil damages awarded to me. For property loss, emotional distress, and the destruction of a family landmark that could never truly be replaced. Marcia didn't say a word when the verdict was read. She just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, as if the weight of her own arrogance had finally settled on her shoulders. Her husband received 6 years. Her son, probation and permanent removal from any public or financial position. The HOA disbanded within weeks. The same homeowners who once whispered and gossiped in online forums now stood together and voted to dissolve it entirely. In its place, they formed something new, a community trust, one built on cooperation instead of control. No dues, no politics, no self-appointed tyrants. Just neighbors looking out for one another. For the first time since all this began, Meadowbrook actually started to feel like a community. When the dust settled, I went back to the creek, to where it all started. The foundation stones still sat in the water, moss-covered and broken, remnants of a bridge that had survived 3 generations before meeting its match in a bulldozer and a lie. I decided it was time to rebuild, not just the structure but the meaning of it. With help from a few volunteers, people who once avoided me but now called me neighbor, we rebuilt the bridge by hand. Local carpenters donated lumber, A few high school students helped pour new concrete footing, and even Joe Ramirez, the retired surveyor, came out with his old level and a grin. It wasn't just construction. It was healing. This time, I added something my grandfather never did. A bronze plaque mounted right into the center rail, polished to a shine. It reads, "Dedicated to those who stand their ground when others try to take it." Every morning now, I walk across that bridge, coffee in hand, the air cool and clean, the sun cutting gold across the water. The sound of the creek beneath me isn't just noise anymore. It's a reminder that some things can bend and still not break. The bridge hums softly underfoot, a low, steady vibration, like a heartbeat made of wood and steel. I think about how long it took to get here, how justice doesn't always arrive with fanfare or flashing lights. Sometimes it comes slowly, like the sound of a rebuilt engine, steady and earned. They tore down my bridge, but I built something stronger: respect.